My name is Robin. I'm 28 years old, and I'm about to show you why I had to set a trap for my own mother just to reclaim my life. The elevator dings with a soft, melodic chime that usually signals the start of my piece. I stepped out onto the fourth floor, the heels of my boots clicking against the polished concrete of the hallway. I'm an architectural designer. I live for clean lines, open spaces, and the quiet dignity of a room that stays exactly how you left it. My apartment wasn't just a place to sleep, it was my first real trophy of independence. I pressed my thumb to the scanner, heard the electronic thrum of the deadbolt retracting, and pushed the door open. I expected the faint, comforting scent of my cedar wood diffuser. Instead, a thick, cloying cloud of lavender mist hit me square in the face. It was the kind of artificial floral scent that makes the back of your throat itch, the kind my mother, Diane, insists is refreshing. Surprise! My heart did a painful somersault in my chest. There she was, standing in my kitchen, wearing a floral apron she must have brought from her own house. She was holding a stack of my dinner plates, rubbing them vigorously with a dish towel. "Mom," I dropped my laptop bag on the kitchen island. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "Oh, Robin, don't look at me like I'm a burglar," she chirped, her voice light and airy, though her eyes were busy scanning my face for signs of exhaustion she could criticize. "I used the spare key you gave me for emergencies, and thank goodness I did. Your dishwasher was a disgrace. I've re-washed everything." "I didn't give you that key for dish emergencies, Mom. I gave it to you in case of a fire or a flood." I walked over and reached for the plates, but she pulled them back, continuing her frantic polishing. "Well, it's a good thing I came," she said, her tone shifting into that familiar, sharp-edged sweetness. "I also took the liberty of resorting your closet. Why you have those black turtlenecks mixed with your blazers is beyond me. You look so washed out in black, honey. You need more color, more life." I looked past her into the living room. My sketches, the ones I'd spent 6 weeks perfecting for the Hillcrest project, had been moved from the coffee table. They were neatly stacked and weighed down by a bowl of potpourri that definitely didn't belong to me. "You went into my closet?" My voice was trembling. "Mom, we talked about this. This is my home. You can't just come in here and rearrange my life because you don't like my aesthetic." Diane sighed, a long, theatrical sound that suggested I was the one being difficult. She set the plates down with a deliberate clack. "I do everything for you, Robin. I drove 40 minutes just to make sure you had a clean home to come back to. Most daughters would be saying thank you, not interrogating their mother." She walked over, tucked a stray lock of my blonde hair behind my ear, and patted my cheek. Her hand smelled like cheap lavender soap. "I'll leave the key on the counter, but honestly, you'd be lost without me." As the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't feel loved. I felt hunted. I looked at the bowl of potpourri, then at the re-washed plates. My sanctuary had been breached, and for the first time since I moved in, I didn't feel like the owner of this apartment. I felt like a guest in Diane's world. The next morning, the first thing I did wasn't making coffee or checking my emails. I called a locksmith. I sat on my sofa, clutching a mug of tea, watching the man work. The metallic shick-shick of his tools was the most beautiful sound I'd heard all week. When he handed me the 2 shiny silver keys, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "All set," he said, packing his bag. "These are high security. Unless someone has this exact key or a battering ram, they aren't getting in." I paid him, tipped him extra, and spent the rest of the day in a state of blissful productivity. I moved my sketches back to the coffee table, dumped the potpourri into the trash, and reclaimed my closet. I even hummed while I worked. For 3 days, I lived in a bubble of peace. I didn't answer my mother's calls. I didn't reply to her just checking in texts. I was drawing a line in the sand, or rather, carving it in steel. On Thursday, I stayed late at the firm. I was finalizing the blueprints for the Hillcrest Atrium, a project that could make or break my promotion to senior designer. I left the office at 8 p.m., exhausted but wearing a triumphant smile. As I walked down my hallway, I felt that same sense of pride. I reached into my bag, pulled out the new key, and slid it into the lock. It turned perfectly. But as the door swung open, the smile died on my face. The lavender mist was back, thicker than before, and it wasn't just the smell. My living room looked like a crime scene of motherly love. My minimalist gray throw pillows had been replaced by frilly, lace-trimmed cushions that looked like they belonged in a Victorian dollhouse. "Robin, is that you, sweetheart?" Diane walked out of my bedroom holding a pile of my sweaters. She looked at me with a face of manufactured pity. "How?" I whispered, my voice cracking. I looked down at the new key in my hand. I literally changed the locks. Diane let out a soft tus-tus sound. "I know you did, and I have to say I was very hurt. To think you'd try to lock your own mother out of your life? It's a good thing Mr. Henderson is such a sweet, understanding man." Mr. Henderson? I felt a surge of cold fury. Mr. Henderson was the building manager, a man in his 60s who was a total sucker for a damsel in a distress story. "I ran into him in the lobby," Diane said, stepping closer to me, her expression shifting into that practiced mask of concern. "I told him I'd driven all the way here because I hadn't heard from you in days. I told him I was so worried you'd fainted or had an accident because you've been working so hard. I might have shed a little tear." He felt so bad for forgetting to give me the new key that he let me right in. She reached out to pat my arm, but I flinched away. "You lied to him," I snapped. "You manipulated a member of my building staff to break into my home." "I did it because I care," she shouted back, her voice suddenly sharp. The mask slipped for a second, revealing the burning need for control underneath. "You're acting erratic, Robin. Changing locks, ignoring your mother. I'm worried about your mental state. I thought I'd stay the night to make sure you're okay." I looked past her, toward my desk in the corner. My heart stopped. My Hillcrest blueprints, the ones I'd spent all day perfecting, were spread out. There were red pen marks all over the margins. "What did you do to my work, Mom?" "Oh, those? The layout was so cold, honey. I just made some notes on where you could add more greenery and soft edges. You're welcome." I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, staring at the red ink bleeding into my hard work. I realized then that a new lock wasn't going to stop Diane. She didn't see my walls as boundaries. She saw them as challenges. If I wanted her out, I couldn't just lock the door. I had to make her afraid to open it. I sat at my desk for an hour after Diane finally left, staring at the red ink on my blueprints. She hadn't just made notes. She had doodled little flowers over my structural load-bearing walls and crossed out my minimalist foyer design with a giant X, scrawling "Too Lonely" in the margin. The sound of the door opening again made me jump, my pen skittering across the paper. "Whoa, easy, it's just me," Mark said, holding up a bag of takeout like a peace offering. He saw my face, then he saw the desk. "Oh, Robin, no, she didn't." "She did," I whispered. I felt a hot, prickling sensation behind my eyes. She got Henderson to let her in. She told him I was having a mental breakdown. "Mark, she's not just helping anymore, she's dismantling me." Mark sat on the edge of the desk, gently taking the red pen out of my hand. "This is stalking, Robin. If anyone else did this, you'd call the police." "I can't call the police on my mother," I said, though the thought had crossed my mind. She'd play the victim. The whole family would think I'm the monster. She has this way of making her insanity look like maternal devotion to anyone watching from the outside. I stood up and paced the length of the living room, my heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. I looked at the lace pillows she'd left on my sofa. They looked like little white headstones for my privacy. She wants to be part of my life so badly? I turned to Mark, a cold, clear idea beginning to crystallize in my mind. Fine, I'll give her a front row seat, but she's going to see exactly what she looks like through someone else's eyes. "What are you thinking?" Mark asked, his brow furrowing. "She's obsessed with milestones," I said, my voice gaining strength. "She wants me to get married, have kids, and live the life she designed. She thinks she has a right to every secret I have." I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. It was mostly empty, used only for occasional sketches. I threw it onto the coffee table. "We're going to tell her we're going away, a nice, luxury, romantic getaway to that resort in the Berkshires she's always talking about. And I'm going to drop a hint, just a tiny, irresistible crumb that you're planning to propose. I'll tell her I think there's a ring hidden in the apartment." Mark grinned, catching on. "And let me guess, there's actually no ring?" "Oh. There will be a box," I said, a slow smile finally spreading across my face. "But the diamond inside is going to be a very different kind of surprise. If she can't respect a locked door, maybe she'll respect a live audience." I reached out and touched the lace on one of the pillows. "She thinks I'm the only one watching me. She has no idea I'm about to start filming." I waited until Friday afternoon to place the call. I knew exactly where she'd be, sitting in her sunroom with a cup of herbal tea, waiting for the world to revolve around her. "Mom, it's me," I said, pitching my voice to sound breathless and slightly giddy. "Robin! Well, I'm surprised you're calling after the way you treated me Tuesday," she said, though I could hear the immediate perk in her tone. She lived for gossip, especially if it involved me. "I know, I'm sorry. I've just been so stressed," I lied, my skin crawling. "Look, Mark is taking me away for a surprise luxury weekend in the Berkshires. We're leaving tonight. I think he's going to propose, Mom." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh, Robin, I knew it. I saw the way he was looking at you." "I found a velvet box hidden in his gym bag," I whispered, leaning into the role. "But it's gone now. I think he's hidden it somewhere in the apartment for safekeeping until we leave. I looked everywhere, but I can't find it. Anyway, I have to go pack. I just wanted to apologize before we left." "Of course, dear. Have a wonderful, private time," she said. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. She wouldn't be able to resist. A hidden ring? A secret to uncover? It was her version of catnip. As soon as I hung up, Mark walked in with a cardboard box. "The security system is here." We spent the next 3 hours turning my sanctuary into a high-tech soundstage. These weren't the bulky cameras you see in convenience stores. They were tiny, pinhole lenses disguised as ordinary objects. One was tucked into the eye of a decorative owl on my bookshelf. Another was embedded in a fake USB wall charger plugged in near my bed. The most important one was hidden inside a smoke detector directly above the kitchen island. "Testing, testing," Mark said, checking his phone. I looked at the screen. The wide-angle lens captured the whole living room in crisp 4K detail. I saw myself on the screen, my shoulder-length blonde hair looking pale under the LED lights. I looked like a character in a thriller. It's perfect, I said. Next came the bait. I took the leather-bound notebook, the diary, and placed it on the kitchen island. I wrote a single entry on the first page. I think tonight is the night. I know he hid the ring in the apartment. I hope he picked the one with the emerald cut. Finally, I took a small navy blue velvet jewelry box. It was empty for now. I tucked it deep inside my sock drawer, underneath a pile of scarves. It was hidden, but not too well, not for someone as practiced at snooping as Diane. "Are you sure about this?" Mark asked, resting his hands on my shoulders. I looked around my apartment. I saw the red marks on my blueprints, the lace pillows I hadn't moved yet, and the lingering phantom scent of lavender. "She thinks she has a right to my life," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Tonight, I'm going to show her exactly what happens when she takes it." We grabbed our suitcases, walked out, and locked the door. I didn't head for the Berkshires. We headed straight to the building's security office, where I'd already made a very interesting arrangement with a very apologetic Mr. Henderson. The security office was a cramped, windowless room in the basement that smelled of ozone, stale coffee, and Mr. Henderson's peppermint breath. It was a stark contrast to my airy apartment. Rows of monitors flickered on the wall, showing grainy hallways and empty stairwells. "I still can't believe I'm doing this," Mr. Henderson muttered, shifting uncomfortably in his swivel chair. "If the board finds out I gave a tenant access to the main feed—" "You didn't give me access, Mr. Henderson," I reminded him, my eyes glued to the monitor that showed my front door. "You're helping me resolve a security breach you accidentally facilitated. Besides, we're mostly watching my own private cameras." Mark squeezed my hand. There she is. On the screen, the elevator doors opened. Diane stepped out. She wasn't wearing her helpful mother floral apron today. She was in a trench coat, looking over her shoulder like she was in a spy movie. It would have been comical if it wasn't so violating. She reached into her purse, pulled out the key Mr. Henderson had given her, and slipped into my apartment. The feed switched to my kitchen camera. The resolution was crystal clear. I could see the predatory gleam in her eyes as she looked around the empty room. She didn't head for the dishwasher. She didn't check the laundry. She went straight for the kitchen island. "The diary," Mark whispered. We watched in silence as my mother picked up the leather notebook. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look guilty. She opened it and began to read, her lips moving slightly as she processed my fake words. A small, triumphant smile played on her face when she reached the part about the emerald-cut ring. "She's actually enjoying this," I said, my voice barely a breath. A cold stone of realization settled in my stomach. She wasn't doing this out of worry. She was doing it for the thrill of the hunt. Diane tossed the diary back on the counter, not where I'd left it, but carelessly, as if she no longer had to pretend. Then she started the search. She went through the kitchen cabinets, moving jars of flour and sugar. She checked under the sink. Then she moved to the living room. On the monitor, I watched her toss my carefully arranged sofa cushions onto the floor. She ran her hands along the undersides of the chairs. "She's like a whirlwind," Mark noted. "She's a burglar," I corrected. The most chilling part was the sound. My hidden cameras picked up her muttering. Where would he put it? Somewhere safe, somewhere clever. Oh, Robin, you always were too predictable. She headed toward my bedroom next. I felt a surge of nausea. That was my most private space, the place where I slept, where I dreamed. "Get ready, Mark," I said, checking the time on my phone. "It's time to invite the guests to the show." My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop on the cluttered security desk. Beside me, Mark was already logging in to the pre-scheduled Zoom meeting. We had titled it Robin and Mark's Special Announcement, a bait so juicy my mother's social circle would never ignore it. "Ready?" Mark asked, his finger hovering over the Admit All button. "Do it," I said. One by one, tiles populated the screen. There was Mrs. Higgins, the town's biggest gossip, wearing her signature oversized pearls. There was Mrs. Gable, who had been my mother's best friend and rival since the 3rd grade. And finally, Pastor Miller, looking confused but kindly through his bifocals. "Hello, is this working?" Mrs. Higgins' voice crackled through the speakers. "Robin, dear, we got your emergency text. Is everything all right?" "Hi, everyone," I said, leaning toward the laptop mic, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Thank you for joining. I'm so sorry for the late notice. I'm actually with Mark, and we wanted you all to be part of a very special moment. But first, I think we should check in on my mom. She's at my apartment right now, and she has no idea we're all watching." "Watching?" Pastor Miller asked, leaning closer to his camera. "Is she preparing a surprise for you?" "Something like that," I whispered. I shared my screen, broadcasting the high-definition feed from my bedroom camera. On the screen, Diane was on her knees in front of my dresser. She had pulled out my sock drawer and dumped its contents onto the rug. She was tossing my silk scarves aside with frantic, jerky movements, her face twisted in a grimace of pure greed. A collective gasp echoed through the laptop speakers. Is that Diane?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice hushed with shock. "What on earth is she doing to that girl's clothes?" "She's looking for something," I said, calmly. We watched in real time as Diane's hand dove deep into the back of the drawer. She froze, her face transformed into a mask of triumph. She pulled out the navy blue velvet box. "There you are," we heard her mutter through the hidden mic. Her voice was tinny but clear. "You didn't think you could hide a diamond from me, did you, Robin?" She sat back on her heels, clutching the box to her chest like a pirate with stolen gold. "Oh, my heavens," Mrs. Higgins whispered on the Zoom call. She's looting." Diane didn't stop there. Before opening the box, she reached over to my nightstand and picked up a small hand-carved wooden jewelry chest that had belonged to my grandmother, her own mother. She tucked it under her arm, clearly intending to take it with her. "She's stealing from her own daughter," Pastor Miller said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "In my 30 years of ministry, I've never seen such a violation of trust." "Now look at the TV in the living room," I told the group. I hit a button on my phone. Back in the apartment, the 65-inch television in the living room roared to life. On the monitor, we watched Diane jump nearly a foot into the air. She scrambled out of the bedroom, clutching the stolen jewelry box and the wooden chest, and stared at the TV screen. She wasn't looking at a movie. She was looking at a grid of faces, her bridge club, her pastor, and her daughter, all staring back at her in silence. The color drained from Diane's face so fast I thought she might faint. She looked like a ghost in a floral trench coat. "Mom," I said through the apartment's smart speaker system, my voice echoing through the rooms she had just violated, "I think you have something that belongs to me." The elevator ride back up to the 4th floor felt like it took a lifetime. My heart was a drum in my chest, rhythmic and heavy. Mark stayed close, his presence a silent anchor while the numbers on the display ticked upward. 4, 3, 2, 1. The doors slid open. I didn't hesitate. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps sounding like thunder in the quiet corridor. I didn't need a key this time. The door was still slightly ajar from when Diane had rushed into the living room to face the television. I pushed the door open. The apartment was a wreck. The lace pillows were scattered, my drawers were hanging open like gasping mouths, and the cloying scent of lavender mist was so thick it felt like a physical weight. In the center of it all stood Diane. She was still clutching my grandmother's jewelry chest and the velvet box. She looked at the TV, then at me, then back at the TV. On the screen, the Zoom tiles were still active. Mrs. Higgins was covering her mouth with her hand. Pastor Miller looked like he was praying. "Robin," Diane whispered, her voice cracking. She tried to muster her usual mask of indignant authority, but it slipped like wet clay. This is a misunderstanding. I heard a noise and I thought—" "Stop, Mom," I said. My voice was surprisingly calm, the kind of calm that comes after a fever breaks. "Everyone saw. They saw you enter with a key you weren't supposed to have. They saw you read my diary. They saw you dump my clothes on the floor and put my grandmother's chest under your arm. I was making sure it was safe," she shrieked, her face turning a blotchy, frantic red. "You're so careless, Robin. I have to protect your things because you don't know how." I walked over to her. I didn't yell. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an emotional breakdown. I simply held out my hand. "The key, Mom, and my things." She looked at the TV screen again. Mrs. Gable, her oldest rival, was leaning into her camera, her eyes narrowed with a look of pure, judgmental satisfaction. That was the blow that finally broke her. Diane's shoulders slumped. The helpful mother was gone, replaced by a woman who had finally been caught in the dark. She dropped the velvet box onto the kitchen island with a hollow thud. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached into her trench coat pocket and pulled out the key Mr. Henderson had given her. She slapped it into my palm. "You've humiliated me," she hissed, her eyes darting toward the laptop Mark was holding. "After everything I've done for you, you set me up. You invited my friends to watch me care for you?" "No, Mom," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "I invited them to watch you be yourself. I didn't have to do anything but turn on the lights." I walked over to the TV and turned it off. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane stood there for a moment, her chest heaving, looking around the room she had tried so hard to claim. "Get out," I said quietly. "Diane!" "Out, now, before I decide to show this footage to the police instead of just your bridge club." She didn't say another word. She grabbed her designer purse, avoiding Mark's gaze entirely, and practically ran for the door. The sound of her heels retreating down the hallway was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. The silence that followed the slamming of the door wasn't empty. It was full, heavy and solid, like a thick blanket draped over the room. For a long time, neither Mark nor I moved. We just stood there in the wreckage of my sanctuary, breathing in the fading scent of lavender and the sharp, ozone tang of adrenaline. "She's gone," Mark said softly. He walked over and gently closed the door, turning the deadbolt. The click sounded final. I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up the navy blue velvet box Diane had dropped. I opened it. Inside, nestled on the white foam where a diamond should have been, was the small folded slip of paper I'd placed there. "Look at the TV, Mom." I crumpled it into a ball and dropped it into the trash. It felt like dropping the last piece of a heavy chain I'd been carrying for years. The next few hours were a blur of motion. I couldn't sit still. I needed the apartment to be mine again. Mark didn't try to stop me. He just fell into step. We worked in a rhythmic, silent partnership. He gathered up the lace-trimmed pillows and the floral cushions, stuffing them into a heavy-duty trash bag. I went into the bedroom and systematically reclaimed my space. I folded my scarves, straightened my drawers, and placed my grandmother's wooden chest back in its rightful spot on my nightstand. I took the bottle of lavender mist from the bathroom and dumped it down the drain, watching the purple liquid swirl away. I replaced it with my cedarwood diffuser. Within minutes, the air began to change. The artificial floral notes were replaced by the grounding, earthy scent of wood and rain. That night, I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't afraid. I lay in the dark, watching the red light of the smoke detector, the one that held the camera, and felt a strange sense of peace. The world knew who Diane was now. There was no more gaslighting, no more, "but she's your mother." The truth was out there, archived in the shocked expressions of the Bridge Club. Monday morning brought a new sense of purpose. I met with Mr. Henderson in the lobby. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His face was a map of guilt and wrinkles. "Robin, I can't apologize enough," he stammered, twisting his ring. "I truly thought—" "I know what you thought, Mr. Henderson," I said, cutting him off gently but firmly. "But from now on, no one enters my apartment without a digital invite sent to my phone. I've installed a biometric smart lock. No keys, just my fingerprint and marks." "Of course, understood," he nodded fervently. I went back up to my office. I had a lot of work to do. I spent the day erasing the red ink from my Hillcrest blueprints. It took hours of careful scrubbing and redrawing, but by 5 p.m., the lines were clean again. The structure was sound. The atrium was wide, open, and flooded with light, exactly as I had envisioned it. Before I left for the day, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "How could you? You've ruined everything. Don't expect to see me at Christmas." I didn't feel the usual spike of guilt. I didn't feel the need to call and apologize for upsetting her. I simply blocked the number. When I got home, I stopped in front of the hallway mirror. I looked at the woman staring back. My shoulder-length blonde hair was a bit messy from a long day of work, and there were faint shadows under my eyes, but my gaze was steady. I reached up, tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear, and smiled. It wasn't a big, triumphant grin. It was small, private, and real. I pressed my thumb to the new scanner on my door. The lock recognized me instantly, chirping a happy little greeting as the bolt retracted. I stepped inside, let the door click shut, and leaned against it. The air smelled of cedar. The lines were clean. The space was mine. I was finally, truly home.